So I'd like to talk about the Casio LWS-2200 as someone with a small wrist. Some might say as small and as sweet as a sweet potato, but let me zoom in so it doesn't look as small. I've owned this watch for a good while and I want to share 2 pros and 3 cons and just some general comments on this watch. Just as a reference, my wrist is 6¼ inches or 16 centimeters around, and I have a wrist table distance from here to here of about 2 inches. But let's talk about the boring stuff. And this is a very weird watch to try to describe, but I will do my best. So from the 12 to 6, I got 34 millimeters. From the bump to bump, the 9 to 3 off to the sides, I got 37.5. And from lug to lug, if you want to call it that, I got 41 millimeters. Now the screen is interesting on this watch. I got 2 dimensions on just how it is. I got 21 millimeters from top to bottom and 24 across. It's a very unusual shape. And in terms of the band, I got it starting out at 20 millimeters and tapering down to just 16.5. But really, that is the boring stuff. Why did I buy it? I wanted a step tracker. Now, more specifically, I wanted a Casio step tracker. I wanted something that was cheap that could track my steps when I go to Japan. We go to Japan a lot, and so in the past, I've used Garmin watches to keep track of how many steps I take, not because I'm into fitness. I find it amusing. It's just an interesting thing that I could say, oh yeah, I walked this many steps per day, and in total, I walked this many miles. I just find that very interesting. And at the time, this is the best one that I found that was cheap and that wouldn't be huge on my wrist. Yes, I know it's marketed towards a women's audience, but I didn't really care. So let's talk about the pros. Pro number 1 is the step tracking feature. Does that look like tracking to you? So again, that's the reason why I bought this watch. I can't speak to the accuracy of step tracking on this watch. I haven't bothered testing it. Frankly, it doesn't really matter all that much. I'm not like a fanatic that I need to know exact counts. I just want to know in general, was I active that day or was I not active that day? What I really like about this in particular is if you push this little button here, it will show you how many steps that you've taken. It's just a quick button and then you can press it again and it jumps back to the watch. I like that feature. I don't have to dive into menus. It's also not on the main face of the watch, so I don't have to see it all day. I just like that. I just push a quick button, boom, it's there, and then I can go back to telling the time. I did wear this watch on a recent staycation trip. We ended up spending most of the time at the pool, but it was amusing to see how many steps I took walking around the pool, chasing my kids and swimming. Again, I don't know the accuracy of it, but it's just nice to see how much I've moved throughout the day. And pro number 2, the display. Not that this display is anything fancy or, amazing in and of itself, but I will say the information in this display, I think it's great. It's unlike any other Casio, let me zoom in, any other Casio watch that I have when it comes to the display. I love that it shows the day of the week up at the top, very prominent. It has this like little seconds ticker up here, which is to me a very unusual feature. It has a date displayed down here as well as the time. Is very easy to read, although I wish there was a way to change this. Maybe there's another way to change it so it's not year, month, and day. I know that's international style, but here in the US, I wish we could change it. But let's talk about the cons. Con number 1 is small size. Now I have a wrist. Now I have a small wrist, and so that's saying a lot. If I'm looking at this watch and I'm like, it's a little small, I do think that the watch is kind of small. And I think when most people buy this watch, especially I think if they're men or they have maybe 6.5 or larger wrist, I think when they first look at the watch, they'll be like, oh wow, this watch is kind of small, and it's probably smaller than you think. It's not a bad thing, and frankly, I'd rather have a watch that is too small or maybe a little bit too small than a watch that's a little bit too big. It just doesn't make me feel good. But still, like when you get this watch and you don't get to try it on, you probably think to yourself, okay, yeah, it's a little small. Now, along with that, con number 2 is it's the screen size. So I liked all of the information that is displayed on this particular watch. I think that it's great. The issue that I have though is the screen is small and it gets smaller than you think. because of the design. So when you look at the crystal, the glass, it's already shrunken down to a pretty small size watch. But then it goes in even more because they add like this little extra lining out on the bezel. Like from the bezel, it's like cramped in even more. It's also angulared even more. It just makes this screen feel cramped. I don't know why they went with this particular design, maybe to differentiate it from, let's say, like your typical G-Shock square, but it is just like cramped and angular. And again, there's a lot of great information on this watch displayed. It's just it's tight. And con number 3, this is a complicated watch. Now I will say it's been a while since I set up this watch. It's one of those things I'm probably just gonna set it, and if it's off by a minute, I'm like, it's whatever, because it was a challenge. From what I remember, it was a challenge to set this thing up, to set the time. Maybe I'm just not used to that kind of watch. I did read the manual though, so that's how I was able to do it. But this is kind of a complicated watch. It's not like your typical easy Casio digital watches that, just beep, 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 you're in. And so hopefully you're patient if you want to use all of the features. Again, I just wanted the step tracker. That's all I wanted. I didn't want, there's all the timing and the alarms. That's not why I buy this watch. It's not why I wear this watch. I'm just wearing it because I want to tell the time. I want to know some of this information, and I want to know how many steps I took for that day. That's it. Now, I don't necessarily regret buying this watch. I know it's typically a woman's watch, and I have no problem with it if it fits my particular wrist, because at the time that I bought this, it was the best step tracker that Casio had, in my opinion, that would fit me. But since then, they've released, I think, a few of these step tracking watches, and I might consider getting one. I mean, I'm not that serious about tracking my steps. It doesn't have to be accurate. It's just a nice feature to have on those trips to Japan, so that I'm just gonna know how much I've walked. And if you've been to Japan, you know that you do a lot of walking. Overall, I'd say it's a small watch for someone with a small wrist. I think for my wrist size, it's good, but not great. I think that this would probably be a great looking watch for someone maybe with a 6-inch wrist or smaller. So, thanks for watching.